It's quite a time that we live in that now Americans who used to be so suspicious, to put it mildly, of government, of any power being concentrated in the hands of the few. And now, as you're saying, you just see so many Americans going about their daily life going, well, the quote unquote experts told us this is the way we have to live. The quote unquote
Right.
experts told us I have to do A, B, and C. And they just do it without asking too many questions. And even when things don't exactly make sense, they still unfortunately go along with it. So you actually make a really good point about brainwashing in your piece. You talk about, and I'm quoting you, said that you didn't think that, you thought it could only happen in totalitarian governments, totalitarian regimes. And yet now we're seeing it in a nominally free country. Why exactly do you think that is?
This was another surprise to me. So when I was a graduate student at Columbia, I was at what they call the Russian Institute. I studied the communist countries, and I learned Russian not in order to order a cheese sandwich, but which most people do, which is fine. I studied it solely to be able to read Pravda, the Soviet communist newspaper, which I got to be able to read. And so my life has been sort of devoted to reading brainwashing news items, if you will, columns. And I was sure most of my life you could only brainwash a people in a tyranny because there's free speech to counteract in a free press. But the free press in the United States, the mainstream press, is Pravda. So whether or not they work for the government, it's an equal brainwash. The New York Times is essentially as honest as Pravda was. And the LA Times and the Washington Post, I just use New York Times. The New York Times spread the biggest lie in American history. 1619, the country was founded, and we had a revolution against Britain in order to maintain slavery. Liberal anti-Trump professors called it a lie. Sean Wilentz at Princeton is one of them, just in case people want to look this up. It's a lying newspaper. They all are. They all are. The president has been right. President Trump has been right in calling it the fake news media. That is exactly correct. That is what they are. And I thought that was restricted solely to dictatorships. I was wrong.
And talking of the New York Times, as we were discussing earlier with the Soviet Union as well, they also covered up for the mass humanitarian crimes that were happening under Stalin's leadership, the mass starvations that were taking place in the Ukraine. They had some of the reporters over there being driven around by the Soviets living the high life, and they're like, I don't see anything wrong here. Everyone looks fine to me. They even wrote in some of their articles that people in the Soviet Union, specifically in the Ukraine, they're hungry, but they're not starving. And that's how they tried to play the game there, unfortunately. What do you think about that?
I've written about it a lot. Walter Duranty got a Pulitzer Prize in 1932. He's the New York Times correspondent in Moscow. Stalin loved the man, gave him a great apartment, great life. And it was exactly when Stalin was deliberately starving millions of Ukrainians to death. People should read The Red Famine by Anne Applebaum, who, for the record, is a never-Trumper. I don't agree with her on politics, but she wrote a true book about what happened in Ukraine, and people should know about that. About 5 to 6 million people were slaughtered, and you will get an idea of how awful it is to starve to death and how you end up eating human beings when that is all there is to eat. This is what was done, and the Pulitzer Prize, which should have been returned by the New York Times 80 years ago, and they still have kept it. The New York Times has 2 Pulitzer Prizes for pure lies. Duranty's in 32, and last year's for the 1619 Project. This is the state of journalism in the United States.
And yet they're the ones to claim to have all this, the moral high ground when they talk to us Americans all the time. And that's the craziest thing, as you were just discussing, looking back at their history over the years. When it comes down to it, all the brainwashing that we've seen in the failing schools, how can we have our civil society? How can American voters make good decisions at the ballot box and govern themselves well, and to be able to choose wisely between candidates when we lack the basic foundations of a solid education? And in many cases, so many people are growing up even without the family unit, which is the bedrock of our society.
My listeners to my radio show frequently ask me, so what should we do first? And I have an answer. Get your kids out of public school. Not in every case. There are some public schools, I'm sure, in rural Kansas that still teach truth. But by and large, certainly in urban areas, they are just left-wing seminaries. I've often said, I started this about colleges, and now it's true about elementary schools and high schools. So I used to have a sort of riddle. Why are Christian seminaries more honest than universities? And here's the answer. Christian seminaries advertise, our purpose is to produce committed Christians. Universities lie. They don't tell you the truth. Their purpose is to produce committed leftists. If the universities acknowledge that, if the New York Times said on its masthead, a left-wing newspaper, I would never attack it. It's the lie that it purports to uphold truth that is so upsetting. Same with the universities. If they said, we will teach you one way to look at life, give us your $50,000 a year and have a great day, I would say nothing.